Playwright, novelist, poet, and composer Langston Hughes hails from Joplin, Missouri. Hughes's eloquent prose is considered some of the very best work of any writer in the first half of the 20th century. He wrote his first poems in high school. Hughes traveled extensively abroad while winning his first poetry contest in 1925. Weary Blues was his first published poem in 1926. His first novel was published in 1930, called Not Without Laughter. Here, he recites one of his poems and reflects on patriotism.
I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful we are and be ashamed. I too am America.
The great contralto singer Marian Anderson hails from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She had no formal singing training until age 15. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, she studied and sang in Europe. A 1935 town hall concert in New York City helped establish Marian as a major singing star. In 1939, Anderson performed at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., after the Daughters of the American Revolution refused to rent her Constitution Hall for a concert. Marian Anderson was the first African-American to sing at the Metropolitan Opera in New York in 1955. Thomas Bradley was born in Calvert, Texas. His family relocated to Los Angeles when he was 7. Bradley won an athletic scholarship to UCLA. He became a police officer after graduation. Bradley spent 21 years on the police force, working his way up to detective lieutenant. He became the first black elected to the Los Angeles City Council in 1963. Bradley was elected the first African-American mayor of Los Angeles in 1973. Dr. Ralph J. Bunche was the first African-American to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1950. Dr. Bunche was instrumental in negotiating peace between Israel and the Arab world in 1948. He was the first black official in the U.S. State Department in 1946. Dr. Bunche earned his doctorate from Harvard in 1934. He was Undersecretary of the United Nations between 1955 and 1971. Coretta Scott King was born on April 27, 1927, in Marion, Alabama. She attended Antioch College in Ohio. Her passion for song inspired her to win a scholarship to study music at the New England Conservatory in Boston. Coretta married Martin Luther King Jr. on June 18, 1953. In 1968, Mrs. King lobbied to raise approximately $10 million to build the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. The center opened in Atlanta in 1981. Frederick Douglass was the leading spokesperson for the anti-slavery abolitionist movement. Born a slave in Talbot County, Maryland, he fled to freedom as a teenager and taught himself to read and write. Douglass founded the North Star in 1847, an African-American newspaper. Dr. Charles Drew founded the first blood bank in 1940 and invented the blood plasma bag. He received his MD and Master of Surgery degrees from McGill University in Montreal. Dr. Drew did the bulk of his blood plasma research at Columbia University in New York City. Sammy Davis Jr. was a show-stopping entertainer, actor, singer, dancer, talent, and legend. He started performing at age 3 in vaudeville with his father and Will Maston as part of the Will Maston Trio. Shirley Chisholm was elected to the U.S. Congress in 1968. She was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1924. She was the first African-American woman elected to Congress and the first black to wage a serious campaign for the 1972 Democratic nomination for president. Chisholm retired from Congress in 1982. In 1936, Jesse Owens made history in Berlin, Germany. A member of the U.S. Olympic team, Owens became the first American to win 4 gold medals. The outstanding track and field star excelled in the 100-meter dash, the 200-meter sprint, the 400-meter race, the broad jump, and on the relay team. From Oakville, Arkansas, Owens grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. He was a standout on Ohio State's track team. Named Fighter of the Century in 1960, Joe Louis was a boxing folk hero. He was known as the Brown Bomber when he stepped into the ring. Born in Lafayette, Alabama in 1914, Louis worked his way up the ranks to become a contender. He captured the heavyweight championship in 1937 and defended his title 25 times. Louis was champion from 1937 to 1949. James H. Meredith was the first African-American student to be admitted to the University of Mississippi on September 30th, 1962. President John F. Kennedy sent 500 U.S. Marshals and 20,000 troops to protect Meredith. Meredith graduated in 1963 and then went on to earn a law degree from Columbia University. Ella Fitzgerald, a jazz great, was one of the first African-American singers to appeal to both black and white audiences. Poverty could not suppress the raw talent that was to lead to her eventual success. She was born in Newport News, Virginia. Her family chose to make New York City their adopted home. As a teenager in the 1930s, Fitzgerald was to begin 6 decades of performance encompassing 250 recordings and 13 Grammy Awards. Judge William H. Hasty was the first African-American federal judge. He was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, and raised in Washington, D.C. Hasty earned his law degree from Amherst College and a Ph.D. in juristic science from the Harvard Law School. Richard Wright was the first African-American author to gain a large mainstream audience. He accomplished this by writing honestly about black inner-city life. I'm for the freedom of the 22 million Afro-Americans by any means necessary. This famous quote by Malcolm X during a December 1964 interview with Claude Lewis was made 2 months before he was assassinated. As an articulate advocate of black pride, Malcolm X quickly rose to prominence as a leader in the Nation of Islam. From humble beginnings to international stardom, the career of Diana Ross has stood the test of time. She has reached out and touched the world as a recording legend, film actor, and nightclub performer. The Boss began her climb to fame at age 14. She formed a singing group with Mary Wilson and Florence Ballard. The Primettes sung at parties around Detroit, Michigan. They auditioned for Motown in 1960. Owner Berry Gordy renamed the group the Supremes. In 1982, Diana's star was placed on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Charles H. Houston was a premier constitutional lawyer and civil rights pioneer. Under his watch as dean at the Howard University Law School, many great lawyers were educated, including future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. A. Philip Randolph is regarded as America's leading mid-20th century African-American social rights activist. In the 1940s, he planned 2 marches on Washington, D.C. in 1941 and 1948. One as a protest against segregation in the military, and the other to call attention to discrimination by the government in hiring practices. Both marches were canceled after his grievances were addressed by political and social changes. Andrew Young became the first African-American to be elected to Congress from the South since Reconstruction in 1972. Young was elected mayor of Atlanta in 1982 and served 2 terms. As co-chairman of the Atlanta Committee for the Centennial Olympic Games, he was one of the key players responsible for bringing the Olympics to Atlanta in 1996. Barbara Charlene Jordan was born in Houston, Texas. She graduated from Texas Southern University in 1956 and from Boston University Law School in 1959. Jordan was elected to the Texas State Senate in 1966, becoming the state's first black senator since 1883. She was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives and spent 6 successful years there between 1973 and 1978. In 1974, Jordan was part of the team that investigated President Richard Nixon's involvement in the Watergate scandal. In 1982, she stepped away from national politics to become a professor at the Lyndon Baines Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas in Austin. Ronald Dellums was elected to Congress in 1970. A former Marine who worked as a psychiatric social worker in Berkeley, California, Dellums served on the Congressional Black Caucus, the Armed Services Committee, and the Fiscal and Government Affairs Subcommittee. The songs of Bo Diddley have been covered and recorded by artists such as the Rolling Stones, the Animals, Manfred Mann, the Kinks, the Yardbirds, Quicksilver Messenger Service, the Doors, Tom Rush, and Bob Seger, among others. Bo Diddley is a pop music icon of enormous influence. Diddley's custom-made rectangular guitar and his playing style, complete with distorted amplification, became a trademark by the mid-1950s. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 1956 that segregation on common carrier buses was illegal. The decision was reached primarily because of a bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama that lasted over 1 year. Rosa Parks, an African-American seamstress, refused to surrender her seat to a white passenger on a Montgomery bus in December of 1955. Arrested for her act, Parks found justice in the end through the courts. In 1999, President Clinton presented her with the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest honor for a U.S. civilian. Edward Kennedy Duke Ellington, composer, arranger, pianist, bandleader, was born in Washington, D.C. Ellington composed over 2,000 songs during his long and illustrious career. A giant of jazz and popular music, Ellington received 10 honorary doctorate degrees, although he never finished high school. Lena Horne, entertainer extraordinaire, was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1917. She was a 16-year-old chorus girl at Harlem's famous Cotton Club in 1933. Horne's legacy includes success with radio, movies, television, records, and Broadway. Her first big Broadway role was in the 1957 production of Jamaica with Ricardo Montalban. This Black History Month salute was produced by Kingsley Smith. Images and biographies are from Empower Encyclopedia.